How are you doing, everybody? My name is Daryl. So good to see you. We're here for another session, which should be entertaining. It should be interesting. I'm actually really looking forward to this conversation, and I'll tell you why. Because the whole concept of account-based marketing, did I mention we're here for account-based marketing? The whole concept of account-based marketing, it's been hot for a few years now, but it's not new. Back in the day, this has been called by many other names. The most popular one would be targeted, account selling, or TAS, for example. But the whole idea of targeting accounts is not new. What is new is all the tools that are available to you, and perhaps how that compares and contrasts to how you're doing it now. So, full disclosure, we're going down the road here of rolling out ABM ourselves at VanillaSoft. And up until now, we've been doing just, the traditional, lead-based demand generation across multiple channels, webinars like this, trade shows, etc. That's how we do it. And it's worked really well for us. But there are some hiccups along the way. And when I say hiccups, the hiccups are going to vary, from what I experience or what you experience. And we're going to talk about that on our show today, and I bring in our subject matter expert. So, one example of hiccup for me would be I have too many leads. I know it's a bad problem. I have too many leads. So I can ask my sales force to follow up on all of those leads, and they will. But along the way, if my leads are not of the highest quality, they're going to start discounting what I'm doing, and that's going to create some discord. It's going to create some misalignment. And then they're going to start saying, well, you know what? Daryl's webinar leads, they're good, but Daryl's trade show leads, they've been less good. And they're going to start tuning me out. So part of the whole reason, at VanillaSoft, our whole catalyst behind ABM was to start giving our reps just substantially better qualified leads. So those are the ones that are getting engaged with first. So that's kind of what's going on here. That's why I wanted to do this topic. The whole idea of ABM is something that we're all faced with. The whole point of this webinar series, we do this on the second Tuesday of every month, is to discuss about technologies that are related to what you and I are going through. It's not a pitch. VanillaSoft does sales engagement. And while that's related, that's a way to follow up on those ABM generated leads. Today, we're talking about ABM. So let's kind of get the show going. I call this the Cutting Through the Crap webinar. And I hope you're not offended by that name, but it really feels that way sometimes. It's just too much crap to put up with. And how do I get to the actual substance, the meat? How do I know what's going on? So with that, I want to talk about our ground rules. So this is your first time joining us on our webinars. The ground rules are pretty straightforward, pretty standard stuff. You're on silent. We can't hear you, but we do want to hear from you. And I'll explain that in a second. The next thing is that we are recording this. So we're going to send you a copy to the very email you used to sign up for this. So that's kind of cool, right? Last, Daryl, you said we wanted to hear from you. So how do I do that? Well, really, it's pretty straightforward. One way is you can use Twitter. And you can see in the slide there, just at VanillaSoft. We're monitoring that. And if there's any good questions come in, we will track that. We will ask myself, or we'll ask our subject matter expert. But the more common way is simply to use the chat window that you should see literally beside or underneath, I can't recall, the actual video player that you have in front of you right now. If you haven't signed in, you can sign in as a guest. You don't need an account. Although if you have an account like I do, every time I come back, I don't have to sign in anymore. That's kind of cool. But you can sign in as a guest and just give us anything you want. Questions, comments, feedbacks. Argue with us, agree with us, give us an anecdote, ask for technical support. Whatever it is you want, that's the chat. That's where the community kind of hangs out. So that is the chat window. Sarvesh has already found it. It's giving me lots of applause. That's fantastic. So you may have noticed I said I'm going down this road, but I mentioned a subject matter expert. That's not me. No. I just look pretty. That's all I do. The smart people are the ones we bring in here, and I want to introduce you to Gil Allouche. He is the CEO at Metadata. You can find them out at metadata.io. Gil, let's bring you on screen here so we can check you out and everybody can see what you're doing. Look at you. You're all smiles. You're hanging out in your office. Look at what he's got going on. He's got the sound effects behind him to absorb it. He's sipping his drink. I got my VanillaSoft brand mug going on here. But this is fantastic. Gil, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you very much for having me.
If you don't know him, he's the co-founder and CEO of Metadata, as I mentioned, and I love his bio. He kind of says, he is a co-founder, but he's busy disrupting a $30 billion MarTech market by employing artificial intelligence and machine learning to automate account-based advertising, campaign testing, and execution, thereby making demand generation more predictable and more scalable, which ironically is everything I just talked to you about. So, Gil, you're going to be my subject matter expert today. We're going to throw a lot of questions at you, and then I'm going to ask you questions to clarify, and then I'm going to disagree with you, and I'm going to argue with you, and we're going to have this back and forth. And in the end of the show, we'll all be a little smarter. Does that work for you?
That works for me. I can't wait.
I love it. Okay, so as we go to the next slide, you kind of get to what the theme was of this whole thing, which was how do you cut through the crap? So, Gil, let me ask you that one question. Do you hear that a lot? I mean, when you're talking to people about, what is the catalyst of ABM? Is it because they're trying to cut through the noise? Or when they're coming to you, before they even know you do ABM, and that's your domain, your expertise, are you talking to your peers and your colleagues and your fellow executives and hearing from them that there's just too much noise and we don't know where to focus? I mean, talk to me about what it is you hear a lot, the complaints, the comments, the concerns that may indicate that ABM is a solution that you should consider.
So I definitely see a lot of confusion in the market, which is kind of my synonymous to grab. So there is a lot of confusion in the market. I think marketers understand that account-based marketing, like you said, it's not a new term, or maybe it's a new term solution. But account-based marketing is a paradigm shift where instead of marketing to everyone, slowly seeing leads come through and then filtering out those leads to marketing qualified, sales qualified, and then start following up on them for a sales engagement. Account-based marketing really just means that you narrow down your target total addressable market into a very particular list of companies that need your product, can afford your product. Currently, they're interested in your product or solution. And then within those companies, you narrow down to only your buying committee, only to the particular personas within those companies that are either influencing a decision to buy your product, they're going to use your product, they're going to say whether they accept it or not for security, financial reasons, etc. So whoever is in that committee that eventually makes the decision to buy and start using your product. That's really account-based marketing. And the confusion is, go ahead, please.
No, your turn. I'm going to jump in, but finish your sentence because I think you're going to get right to where I was going to ask you. So go for it.
I was about to say that the confusion is in what does they translate to. And that's where the confusion becomes serious because there are so many solutions out there in the market. Some of them will help you buy data, like an inside view, ZoomInfo, Aberdeen, Bombora. Some of them will run a predictive model to tell you based on your historical data who you should go after next and how you should prioritize your accounts. Solutions like Mintigo, Lattice Engines, Radius, LeadSpace, Sixth Sense, so on and so forth. And then some of them, like Metadata, will help you build those audiences and then go after them wherever they go. That's Metadata, that's print factions, and those for direct mail, demand-based for programmatic, tremendous for programmatic, so on and so forth. And so that's where the confusion kind of starts. And that's where we can put it a lot more clear for the consumers, telling them within account-based marketing, these are the best practices of coming up with your total addressable market, figuring out who you should go after, and then this is how you go after them. And so once you divide it into those subcategories, it's much easier to follow a process.
So we're going to cover the tech stack a little bit in the webinar later on, but it's funny you bring it up now, and we'll tease it a little bit. That was probably the biggest thing for me that when I was doing my research that I was blown away by was how much you mentioned all these vendors for different purposes, right? Whether I'm trying to identify the accounts or go after the accounts or whatever it might be. Whether it be a Bombora, buyer intent data, etc. It's all these little niche, and I shouldn't say niche because some are quite substantive. All these niche or expert systems that do this much of the piece of the pie. And then the flip side of that was I would see vendors, perhaps like a Terminus or an Engagio, who would claim to do end-to-end. Now, we all know they don't necessarily do end-to-end, but they would claim to do end-to-end. But then when you actually reach out to them, you realize there's a lot of caveats around that. So for example, This is something that's killing me. When I talked to Terminus and I talked to Engagio, they both said, oh, you have to have Salesforce.com. If you don't have Salesforce.com, we won't work. So it's like, wait a minute. You claim to do everything, but A, you need a CRM, so you don't really do everything. And B, it has to be Salesforce.com. So you don't do everything. So it's almost like I want to do ABM, but I'm overwhelmed by my options and what is the right mix of tools to adopt, and how do I manage my costs? Because if I get too many tools, this becomes an expensive investment. So that's me. Are you hearing that yourself when you talk to your peers or your prospects?
100%. What you just said is kind of the classic scenario. First of all, and I agree with you 100%, no one does everything. And if you do everything, you're one of two. It's like going to a restaurant and seeing like a 17 pages menu. It's likely that you have, if a company does everything, it does all of these things average minus. Like they don't do a good job in any of those things. I much prefer to go to do kind of a best of breed approach, where you go for a vendor and you only use them for what they do best, nothing else. It's like when you hire a service provider, they tell you, we're really good at SEO, but we can also do SEM and infographics for you, and we can
Right.
also do email campaigns. But there's only one thing they are crushing it in, and that's the only thing I want them to do for me. And so I completely agree. No vendor does everything. The only other scenario of one vendor that does everything is if it's a huge conglomerate. Like you look at the companies like Salesforce, Adobe. Some of those companies are purchasing and buying companies in and out because they want to have to be the one stop shop for everything. But usually those companies move slower. They have to acquire companies because they can't innovate as fast and build the latest technology. So I completely understand and agree. This is exactly the perception in the market, and that's why there's so much distrust, and that's why it takes a while to implement some of those technologies, because the buyers are confused. They don't know what to believe. They know that there is a little bit of buzzwording out there, and so they have to sift through the noise and figure out what to buy, and what's true, what's not. The second piece that you also mentioned is that you don't want to have too many tools. I know companies who have demand-based and terminus,
Yep.
and they don't even know why. If you ask them, they tell you like, yeah, they have one feature here that I really like. There's a different feature, but we're thinking about closing the contract with one of them. Like, how did you end up with all these tools? Mostly, they may not even have people to operate those tools. And I think that that's one of the biggest uh, pitfalls in marketing technology. The marketing technologies today are available. You have, whether you have the latest technology, you have vendor A or vendor B, the difference is not huge. It's how you operate those technologies, because the human factor is really the bottleneck in your marketing operations. Having a person or multiple people wake up in the morning, logging into those systems and operating them day in, day night, so that they work in cohesion with one another, and you kind of create that demand generation machine using all of those different tools. That's the biggest challenge that I think exists in the marketing technology today. And that's exactly the challenge and the gap that we're trying to bridge by having an AI operate those technologies versus humans doing technical, repetitive, mundane tasks.
It's something that you're speaking to that a lot of people forget, that there are various technologies. I'll use an example, not for ABM, but I'll just use the example of, say, marketing automation. You can have Pardot, you can have Marketo, you can have HubSpot, you can have Eloqua, you can have Aprimo, you can have Acton. In the end, they all relatively do the same. Some do some things better than others. Hey, we get that, but they do it relatively the same. The difference is the people on your team. How skilled are they? Do they understand how all the pieces work together? Do they know how to play it? You can play an instrument, or you can play an instrument well. You're both making sound, but one is much more pleasing with the end results you want. And do you have those people? So part of ABM is making sure you've got the people and the skills and the budgets and the resources necessary to make this investment pay off. All right, Gil, quick and dirty. What are some of the symptoms I may have, the problems in my company, organizationally, whatever you might call it, that says I might be a candidate for an ABM strategy?
That's easy. So if you can define your total addressable market using data, if you can narrow down the kind of companies that give you a signal that they need your product, they can buy your product. If you can narrow down and get that list, and if your product or service is is expensive enough, so your ACV is high, I would say 50K and above,
Yep.
and it's a complex sale, I would say you're a good candidate for account-based marketing, because that means that you can narrow down. So by defining those target accounts, that means that you can narrow down your list of companies to go after in the buying committee, if you will. That's one. So tactically, you can make it happen using technologies and data. Two, if you invest a lot more per those accounts, um, let's say you spend $5,000 per opportunity to just generate an opportunity in Salesforce. If you close a deal for 50K, it's worth it. It's a machine. It's a flywheel that you want to invest in. And then three, if it's a complex sale, that means that you have to work on not only one individual, but it's a complex sale. It may take 3 months. And so that sales cycle, it's a perfect match for account-based marketing. Those three together tell me that you're a good candidate for ABM.
All right. I love how you set the stage for that. That's beautiful. We're going to move on to the next slide because that's going to speak to what we're going to cover today, exactly to set the stage for what Gil was talking about. And the first thing we're going to hit on, is account-based marketing the answer? We've already started talking a bit about that. We're going to talk about what it means from an impact organizationally, expectations between your sales team and your marketing team, because it's one of those things that if they're not aligned, Gil used the analogy of a flywheel. And if you don't know a flywheel, it's kind of thing, if it's meant to drive something. And the more momentum it gets, the easier it is to make you go even faster and faster and faster and faster. You heard Jim Collins talk about that initially in From Good to Great. Now, the downside to that is the faster and faster and faster it goes, the more explosive, the more catastrophic it can be on your organization, because it's just so much more dramatic. So there's that. We're going to talk a little bit about what it means to target. How do you figure out who to target? And then we're going to get a little more sophisticated. What does it mean if I bring in some buyer intent data? So I said I want to target these people over here, but I've got some buyer intent data that says these people over here, and some of them are on the list, they overlap a little bit, but some of them are not. What do I do with that? Finally, we're talking about the agile tactics. So if I know who to target, and what do I do? Is it email? Is it advertising? Like, how does it change? Are the tactics the same to what I'm doing now? Are they nuanced? Are they dramatically different? And then, remember I mentioned the tech stack? Gil started bringing that up. I love it. How does it all fit into your tech stack? And then finally, some of the best practices. And along the way, any questions you have, put them on the chat window. We'll bring them, we'll ask them, and life will be grand. So there we go. So let's go on to our first slide, which really is ABM the answer. So I think the three rules you just kind of gave us really set the stage. If you couldn't connect with what Gil was just saying there, that ABM is probably not the answer. But if you could, then I certainly think ABM is the answer. Now, let me ask this question to you, Gil. And this is an interesting question. Why would marketing want ABM? And then why would sales want ABM? What is their number one respective motivations to adopt this strategy?
Well, CMOs in B2B companies are there to serve the CEO and the CRO. Really, these are the two customers. And I would say it's first CRO and it's CEO later. They do branding, they do positioning for the company. That's for the CEO. But really, the generating in a B2B company, pipeline is king. So if the CMO generates pipeline that sales can close, sales is happy, marketing is happy. So both of them have kind of mutual goal, and that is to generate pipeline. At the end of the day, CMO and CRO are both going to be in the board meeting saying we met our goals for the quarter, or we haven't met our goals for the quarter. And sales is going to say marketing provided X percentage of my pipeline, or marketing provided 0% of my pipeline. And CMOs have about 18 months to prove their worth. Their average tenure is about a year and a half to say, Can I build pipeline that sales can close, or I cannot? And so that's the status quo. That's the situation. That's why both personas are interested in account-based marketing. Particularly, sales folks are very interested in account-based marketing because it makes their life easier, where they don't have to have a complex operation and they don't end up getting leads that are irrelevant. They don't end up getting students from overseas or vendors or consultants or even companies that look good but are not in market or cannot afford their product. All of that is time waste. It's time waste and resource waste for sales. And so if they can get from marketing only the kind of leads, the right personas within the right companies that they're already going after to begin with, but now marketing is created, has activated them, created situation in which those companies are now in the website, in the landing pages, raising their hand, downloading white papers, joining podcasts and webinars, etc. That makes life for sales a lot easier. So that's the main interest. And marketing, they want to get credit that they're building pipeline for sales because that's their main job. And so that's the main motivation. And actually, account-based marketing is one of the most, I would say, one of the best forcing factors to get marketing and sales working together versus working in a silo, which has been traditionally the case. And so that's a good opportunity for sales and marketing to really work together.
I'll throw one more angle out there, one you may not have thought about, guys, which is, everything Gil just said is spot on, right? Marketing wants high quality leads because they want to be able to go to the board and say, look, this is what I contributed to the sales team. Therefore, this is important to understand. Let's just say hypothetically, the sales team sucks. Well, then you can say, this is not my fault. I'm marketing. I've got super high quality leads here. This is a sales problem, not a marketing problem. So a little bit of cover your behind, right? That's the first thing. Sales, of course, wants, they may be overwhelmed with leads. The average number of call attempts is 2. They should make at least 6 to 8 according to stats. We talked about this before. So either you really force them to do a cadence using tools like, VanillaSoft or SalesLoft or Outreach, who are really focused on that. Or if you can't change that behavior, then you just give them the most massively qualified leads possible so that that's where their attention is. But here's the thing you hadn't thought about. It's really important that sales and marketing are aligned. What is a lead? What is our service level agreement to each other? If I give you a lead, if I'm marketing and give sales a lead and hits these certain thresholds, are you going to call them in 5 minutes, in 1 hour, in 1 day? What do we understand? How many attempts you're going to make? What are the parameters of a lead as far as its attributes, revenue, company size, industries, etc.? Getting that alignment ensures you're both focused. So you go and present a united front to the board, and your spend on driving the revenue from the marketing and sales side is optimal. Let's go with that. It's optimal. Having those conversations is the only way you can do that. And sometimes you need an excuse. ABM is a brilliant way to have that excuse for sales and marketing leaders to sit down and teams to sit down and saying, let's make sure our ducks are in a row. What you're doing, what we're doing, how you're qualifying, who you're targeting, how we're going to follow up with them, how you're going to engage them back and forth. It's a brilliant way to force behavior, let alone achieve results. Throwing it out there because it's often something that's overlooked. In fact, that's probably a good time to change slides, which is, if I recall, it's probably how do I ensure sales and marketing are aligned? Because basically what I understand, the stats say that 1 in 4 teams are blatantly not aligned. So 25%, some will say it's higher. All right. And it's even more, for example, Task Group was saying that can cost 10% of your revenue or more just by simple not being aligned. So you want to be aligned. So I guess I come back to you, Gil. How do we get alignment? How can ABM force alignment? I talked a little bit about having those conversations, but are there tools in place to ensure that they can kind of police each other and they can monitor each other's programs? Can marketing use an ABM tool to make sure that sales is actually actively engaging? And can sales use that same tool to make sure marketing's just getting the leads that I want and we agreed to? What's the best way to get that alignment?
So one of the challenges doing ABM is getting change management, essentially getting the environment, your company, to give you budget, but also give you time and leeway, because it's not going to work like this. It's not going to just appear. You say, hey, I'm going to do ABM, and next week you're going to have 50 converted MQL from your named accounts. That's not the way it works. Usually it's a trial and error. You have to go through a few iterations until you reach the promised land. And so that's why alignment is key, because then you get that leeway. You basically say, I want to set up an account-based marketing operation for the company. I need your help. I'm marketing, I can execute, but I need help with a strategy, and I need help with figuring out which accounts to go after and which to go after first, and what does success look like. And that's kind of your cue or your forcing factor to create that alignment. And tools can help. I would say it's mostly, in my opinion, and that's just my opinion, I think it's mostly organizational, and it's technology after. Technology can support it, but not vice versa. So this is the way we do it at Metadata, and we even use our tool for that. So the first piece in account-based marketing is coming up, or the first component is coming up with accounts. How do you come up with a list of accounts? There's criteria. Now let's see that everyone has the same criteria. I will not run an ABM program without the first stage of defining the exact target audience, with my salesperson vetoing my decision. My opinion is not as important, because I eventually want to generate lists for sales to close. So I want sales to tell me very clearly, ideally written, Gil, if you were to give me those personas within those accounts tomorrow as an inbound opt-in lead, I will know how to develop them into an opportunity, into a closed booking. When I get that checkbox, that confirmation from my salesperson, the only thing I have left now to do is execute. And that makes my life so much easier, because then the lead comes through and I can clearly say, here is the lead we talked about from this company. It's opt-in. HubSpot or Marketo is marking it as a marketing qualified leads. Go. And I can work with them still on the execution, and I can give them advice and how to execute best against those leads, so on and so forth. But we already basically achieved 50% of the problem, which is what is our goal, and if we achieve it, now we know we're successful. So going back to the tactic level, I think the sales and marketing alignment is done best when, before you execute, you are 100% aligned on who you're executing against, and what does success look like. And then from that point of view, before you actually start running any campaigns, I would highly recommend that when you generate those lists, whether you use metadata or whatever solution out there, you can, to define your list of target accounts, whether you're using competitive targeting, buyer intent, like you mentioned, using Mintigo or G2 Crowd List or Bombora. Before you actually go into the execution mode, you really should get full alignment from the CRO or head of sales, and kind of set the stage of, this is a pilot that we're doing. It's going to be X months before we test to see how we're doing with this pilot. And this is going to be success for us. If we were able to get 50 of the 1,000 accounts we generate leads from them, or we get 25 of the 1,000 accounts to come to our website and spend more than 1 minute. You set up your own KPIs, be conservative at first, make small wins. That would be the best sales and marketing alignment. And by making sales part of it, remember, sales life is kind of a lonely life. They have a quota, and they kind of do whatever you need to do to get to that quota. You're kind of giving them a little bit more color into their job. Now they're part of a bigger thing, of an account-based marketing approach, of a process. They're part of the solution. They can vet the account. So because they're part of the process, it's more likely than not, then they will have more leeway with you. Even if you don't get all the right leads from the get-go, month 2, they'll tell you, oh, it's okay. Maybe we need to change the list of companies still. Maybe we have to change the messaging a little bit. This is something that works for me in the call email that I do. And so they'll really be a part of the solution. And that's the ideal way of forming that sales and marketing collaboration.
So I'm trying to think when I want to ask these questions, because my mind fires all over the place, and I know what our slides and the order are. Let me go this route. What I've seen work well in the past, I'm trying to get sales and marketing aligned, is a common framework. I love what Gil just said. He said, "Show me the persona you want. Show me the accounts you want." And that's so personas, accounts, etc. That's all terminology, right? You want to have a common language that you can, so you both know what each other's saying. That's one of the things you talk about the word lead. Marketing could say I made a lead, sales could say I make a lead, but we could have vastly different definitions of the word lead and not even know that. Marketing, a lead could be they stopped by my trade show booth and they got their free giveaway, the little toy, and they walked away. That's a lead. Whereas sales could say, well, the lead is, they're in the right industry, the right company size with the right, title, and they've done all the due diligence and they've seen the demos and they're ready to physically make a decision in the next 30 days. Vastly different definitions of lead, even though they're both using the same term. So frameworks, definitions are great. There's a lot of people out there who are good at this. Serious Decisions is an example. They have their demand waterfall. One of the ones I saw recently is the acronym TEAM, TEAM. And what I liked about it was as simple as a starting point, and it was about who are we going to target. So again, Gil, right? What did he said? Personas and accounts. So who are we going to target? Number 2, E. How are we going to engage them? Next one, A. Once we engage them, how are we going to activate them? And finally, M. How do we measure results? You heard Gil say that. Get your KPIs, set them up, measure it. So put in whatever framework works for you. You don't need to use TEAM. You can use whatever you want. Just agree on a framework and then work together with your counterparts on that. I'm going to change the slide now because I actually want to drill down on what Gil was talking about, and this is the part that when I look at ABM, it's the part that's almost the most puzzling to me. The question is, how do I identify the accounts I'm going to target? So Gil said, give me the personas and give me the accounts. Sales is asking, marketing's asking for this from sales, or sales is saying to marketing, this is who I want you to get. Well, that's one way. I've seen other vendors, Gil talked about how many options are out there from solutions. I've seen other vendors say, and you heard Gil use the word, whether it be metadata, which ironically is, the name of his company, but the idea of doing an analysis of your install base, your customer base you already have, and trying to come up with, a, what do we call it, an attribute, a series of attributes that your customers have, and now we're going to go out looking for those customers because they would be the best fit. All right, so you're going to get more of what you've got already, which is great if what you've got is what you want. It's not good if you're trying to go to new markets. But that's a great use of AI to say, we think that these accounts are A accounts and these are B and these are C based on our AI, based on what we've seen of your install base or your competition's install base. If your base isn't big enough, that would be a good fit for you guys. These are the guys you should focus on, etc. So Gil, let me ask you this. What's the starter's method of determining which accounts to target? Is it as simple as you suggested, where sales is saying, this is who I want you to go after? What's the more advanced way of doing it? Is it artificial intelligence? And then the next thing is what's the quantity? Am I identifying 25 accounts, 100 accounts, 200 accounts, 500 accounts, 1,000 accounts? Because I've heard different answers here too.
Yeah, this is a tougher one because this is, it gets into the depends kind of answers. So it depends. There are different kind of companies out there. I think if you're targeting 25 companies in the whole wide world, don't use any of the technologies in general. If you have 25 companies to go after, you're a sales-driven organization. You're going to do elephant hunting. There are 25 elephants for you in the world. Hire a team that can go and build specific landing pages to each and every one of those 25 companies. They will go and send direct mailer packages. They'll set up ads. They'll send emails. They'll go and visit those personas in those locations for those 25 companies. And that's going to be your approach. It's going to be a brute force because your target is so small. You just have to be laser focused and put all of your field against those 25 targets. So I'm going to take that as an exception and not talk about a situation in which your total addressable market is 25 companies. But if your total addressable market is more in the 1,000, 5,000, 50,000 companies in the world, account-based marketing is a good approach for you, and account-based marketing at scale. Now, how are you going to define those companies? It really depends on the organization. If I like to test personally. I'm an engineer in my training, and my company is also all about training. I watched Mad Men, that show about advertising for a long time. I loved Mad Men. Kind of jealous at this guy Don Draper's cool demeanor. But how many companies in our space, in the B2B tech or in general, how many companies really have the luxury of working with a person like Don Draper? How many of us have the millions of dollars to pay for those crazy, amazing billboards and marketing blasts versus, we have a very limited budget and we have to figure out what message is going to resonate well, who's the target audience, what channels we should go with, so on and so forth. It's a lot harder for us, and we don't have the luxury of working with the madmen. And so for me, experimentation is key. Trying out different messages, different channels, different personas, different audiences. That's the way to achieve optimization. That's the way to get to that holy land where you have a process in place that it's constantly testing out new variables, but you already know more or less what your demand generation machine can yield. And so to get to that place, you have to try different tactics. And so when we work with our customers, we really do have, as you were mentioning, as you were asking the question, is it sales tells you which you want to go after? Is it AI? Is it Salesforce? We really do use all of them, all of the above. And we try out and see which one works best for your company. So you look at the companies that we work with, one B2B storage company that we work with, they have lists of accounts per region that their sales manager gave us. And so we have companies for North America, 1,000 companies for West, for East, 1,000 companies for EMEA, for APJ. That comes from sales. We build those audiences. They gave us a CSV list of those audiences. They give us the criteria of the people that they need to go after within those accounts. We build the audience. We tell the marketing person, go back to your sales manager who gave you that list, show them the audience that we have generated, and let them confirm 100% that these kind of people within those companies, if you were to bring them those kind of leads, opt-in inbounds from those companies, will they be delighted? If you get a confirmation, that's one audience now you have dictated from sales. So at least the targets, there's no argument around them. That's one input point, great input point to start with. Even if you have that list, unless sales told you, I want to go after, out of these 1,000, I want to go after those 100 first this quarter, 200, next quarter, these other 400 the quarter after. Unless they gave you the prioritization, you can combine that list that they gave you with AI and with buyer intent to tell you which one to go after today, which one to go after tomorrow. So companies like Aberdeen, Edgy Data, or better yet, Mintigo, that aggregates many of those data sources together, they can tell you, oh, by the way, the contract that prospect A has with your competition ends in a week. So maybe it's more interesting for you to go after this company tomorrow versus company B, which may have a contract with your competitor for another 3 months or a year. And maybe you want to use Bombora or G2 Crowd to say, oh, by the way, I noticed that company A, B, and C are currently searching. They're currently searching for your keywords, for your kind of keywords. If you sell a data product, and they're currently searching for data product or business intelligence product, what have you, maybe that gives you some kind of an intent indicator that today is a better day to target them than tomorrow. So combining AI with the list of companies that you get from sales is possible and can help you prioritize those accounts. And then finally, when you ask what's the range that is healthy, depending on the channel, you have different ranges. If you're just using ads, then the larger the number of accounts and the larger number of buying community, the buying persona per account will make it easier for you to actually start executing against them. If you have a list of 100 companies and it's 10 people per company, you have a list of 1,000 people to go after. It's a very, very small list. And it's very hard after you match the number of cookies with that list and after you start uploading them to different channels, you only end up with 300, 400 people to go after. the likelihood that every day you'll be able to pick a few people from that list to be on Facebook or LinkedIn or programmatic and see your ad and click on it and engage is very low, because there is no statistical sample there. It's just a very small, discrete audience to go after to begin with. So for advertising, we really recommend that you expand the net a little bit, get more personas, get the same companies in multiple locations, so on and so forth, to have at least a few thousand at the bare minimum. A few tens of thousands is even healthier. It will also get the cost per lead down significantly. If you're using a direct mailer, a list of 200, 300 accounts is 100% fine. And direct packages would work very well, even with that small of a list. So hopefully I touched all of the questions that you asked.
You did well. You did well, my friend. What do you think of the whole idea of AI, using it to, do an assessment of your current sales, and the AI tool, creating an algorithmic assessment of your ideal customer profile? Are you for that, against that? What are your thoughts?
I am for it. I mean, in our solution, one of the ways to build an audience is to connect your sales force, tell it how far to go back. If you have any filters, click OK, and that will automatically generate an ideal customer profile. Just like you said, from your historical sales data, it will build that profile and will let you right from there to generate an audience of lookalike companies and people that match that profile. But just like you said, one, it's only as good as your historical data. So if you want to go after net new fields, it's not a good idea. And two, is just one of the inputs that you may use. But going after a whole net new list of accounts, going after competitors, going after companies with a buyer intent, going after particular criteria might be relevant as well. So we believe in the 20/80 rule, just like we think experimentation is good. So that's why we have that feature. I think generating lookalikes from is a great idea. Going to your salesperson and asking them, do you have a list of target accounts for this quarter? Get me that list. Getting a list of companies using competition, good idea. And then test it out. See for your company which one is better, which one is not. For example, I can tell you from metadata, one of the best campaigns that we see right now working is a G2 crowd audience campaign, which means if you go to the G2 crowd, which is kind of Yelp for software, if you go on G2 crowd and you're searching for account-based marketing or account-based execution software, which we belong to that category, you will start seeing ads for G2 crowd assets. You'll go on Facebook, on LinkedIn, you'll go on ESPN or YouTube, you'll see an ad that said, you're searching for the account-based execution solution, download this PDF to see the top 3 performers and how they rank against each other from the G2 crowd grid. That ad is our ad. It doesn't mention metadata anywhere, not in the copy, not in the creative, not in the call to action, not in the landing page. The reason is, all we want to do is provide value to prospects who are currently in the process of purchasing or considering an account-based execution software. We just want to be at the table when they make that decision. We don't want to push our message earlier. No one's going to believe us either. Of course, we're going to say we're the best, but we're subjective to it. And so why is it performing well? Because we know there is intent. We know what the intent was, because G2 Crowd would sell us that data set of this company is currently searching for account-based execution at this time of day, from this location, from this state. We can infer who is likely to make that search based on the personas that are usually interested in our solution. So we guesstimate who to go after. We then serve ads, and they self-select themselves. If they click on the ad and convert, ask for that report, now they're known lead for us. There is some intent, they opted in, and now our salesperson can, first of all, send them the grid, the PDF they were asking for, and offer, if you're interested, to get a demo for metadata. That's a campaign that is performing very well for all of those reasons, and that's kind of some of the best practices that we see to execute some of those campaigns.
So we do much the same thing here at VanillaSoft, right? We use G2, we use some of that buyer intent data, as you're talking about, where we know company A or company B is researching or evaluating content on G2 Crowd that is related to what we do. And they share with us that it's this company and this is what they've done, their behaviors. And then it's up to us to manually go and determine, do the research. What are the right personas, whether we're using that on LinkedIn Navigator or, Discover.org or Zoom Info or whatever it might be, and then we do outbound targeting of them. But that's the question I have for you. If account-based marketing says I'm going after these accounts, but then the buyer intent data says, here are some leads that are researching what you do as a company, but those leads are not necessarily in your target accounts. Is that ABM? Can buyer intent data and targeted account marketing work together?
I think so. I like to keep an open mind. I would say if you get a list of 1,000 companies currently researching your categories, you can decide to personally reach out to a 50 of them, because 5% of that list might be your perfect ideal customer profile, and they're in your named accounts. You wanted to go after them anyway. This is just a proof that you need to go after them today. I would go and do that and ask the salesperson to reach out to them personally. And I would support him or her with ads and direct mailers, etc. For the other 950, I would still give them some love, unless I know for a fact 500 of them are disqualified. Even if I hop on a call with them, they don't have the budget, that they're the wrong size, the wrong location, I don't have an offering for them. Of course not. I would not spend a second on them, not my budget, not my time, because it's bad for it's a lose-lose situation. But for the other accounts that might not be in my list, maybe they should be, or even if they're not in my list because they don't represent my highest ACV, but they can still be a good close one business for me, I would still go after them. Even if not personalized approach from sales, I will do the best I can from a marketing perspective to nurture those leads and get them to a place where sales is very keen to talk to them. And so I would keep my opportunities open and be open to potentially changing that list based on data that I see.
I fully agree with what you're saying, and this is a really important point. In that example we just gave, buyer intent data suggests that this company is actively looking for a solution you offer, even though that company may not be in your list of identified accounts. What Gil just said was, you're still a marketer. That's still a buying sign. You still do your traditional marketing that you're doing today to target them. Who are the right personas, the head of sales, head of marketing, whatever it might be, that I should be focused on in that organization? What is the message? How should I engage with them? Email, phone, social, a combination. What content should I share based on their industry or their company size? That's marketing. All right. It's not just account-based marketing, it's marketing. So you really start to see that ABM is a complementary to your traditional marketing as well. It's not, in my opinion, you're not all in on ABM at the expense of others. I think you do them together. But that said, here's the question. You, Gil, talked about, if I'm doing advertising, I want to have thousands, the more personas, the better, the thousands of accounts, the better. But if I'm doing direct mail, 200, 300, whatever, that's a much smaller size, makes more sense. So here's my question. When I identify the accounts, how do my tactics change? How do they change from the generic lead-based marketing I'm doing today? Do they change? Now, you've talked about programmatic advertising, where I'm being very specific. I'm saying just these accounts or just these domains or what have you. I get that. But the rest of the tactics, are they the same? Like how does my strategy change?
So I think based on the cohorts that you have in your target accounts or your targets in general, you're going to deploy different tactics. So let's imagine you're a B2B tech startup called VanillaSoft, and you're going after 10,000 companies in the whole wide world. You've identified 500 of them to be your key accounts and 50 of them to be 50 key accounts that you want to go after this year because they expressed some interest and they are just like perfect ones for you to go after. For the 50, I would run personalized emails. So the ones you type and don't put on VanillaSoft or Outreach or SalesLoft. I would do 50 direct mailers. I would spend, I don't know, $50 per package, make them really personalized, very,
like
very attractive, very compelling.
Or PFL or what have you.
Exactly.
Okay.
I would run ads programmatically and on social. So I identify exactly the cookies, mobile device IDs, IP addresses of these particular personas within those particular accounts. And and that's how I would write, kind of create a multi-touch approach for those, high touch, even for those, even, a sales campaign for those 50 targets. For the other 500 or 1,000, I would start being less personal. So, and email cadence, 6 to 8 email, touch email cadence on VanillaSoft outbound. That's good. Maybe a much lower cost package, maybe just a card or something, or a gift card where only if they take a meeting they get a gift card. That could be good for the other 958 targets. And then maybe programmatic advertising with general brand awareness, and only go forward with the ones that are actually clicking on and coming to your website, merit more actions. And so that's how I would do it. I would basically not do the same exact approach for all 1,000, but I would treat them a little differently based on their value to your company. That's how I would divide and conquer.
I love that. You nailed it. So, when you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, because what I'm hearing Gil say is I've got my regular marketing programs and they're still there, but for that 50, if you will, that's a superset of marketing programs, massively focused, highly personalized. But you use the word value. They're worth more to you, hence the word value. But that also means that they're more valuable and you should invest more. So you talked about sending, with a Sendoso, PFO, whatever, or I'm sending, incentives to them, and maybe a gift card, a personalized mug with their name on it, who whatever, it doesn't matter. Those cost more, but because that's your target account and that's who you really, really want, that's where you spend the money. You're not sending 1,000 or so a personalized mug. You're sending just a 50, and because that's who you want. So it's a superset. Very targeted. Love that. So let me segue to the next slide, which is really about how do I build this out? Where does it fit into my tech stack? We did talk about it. Nobody does everything. There's a lot of different permutations on what is the right stack. How would you recommend people approach their tech stack if they're starting they want to launch their first ever ABM initiative?
Okay. So I would say a data component is very important. Even if they have a list of target accounts, they probably don't have all the contacts within those accounts. So the data component is important. Either you get it as part of a package, like with metadata, the component is included, or you go to the technology to target them. So data, I would say, and kind of the most important, because that's also how you get the buy-in from sales. Second one is the human component. You have to have someone who is at least, I don't know, big portion of their week, 20 hours a week, or 10 hours a week to execute and then measure. So I would say the third one would be determined based on your list. If a list is super small, the direct mailers. If it's more than that, it's email and ads. If it's small, you can also do all three together. That's how I would recommend the tech stack.
All right. So if I had to look at best practices, because if I'm going to roll this out, I want to do best practices whenever possible. Is there one or two best practices that come to mind for you that you can share based on your experience to say, don't make this mistake, or if you're going to do anything, do it this way? Just top of mind.
Yes, 100%. Biggest one that comes to mind for my own customers is don't end up in the user error paradigm where you think that for your company X doesn't work, but it really only doesn't work because you haven't used it properly. So we have companies, customers tell us, Facebook doesn't work for us. We're B2B tech. And I tell them, what if I told you that Facebook can be your biggest channel for bringing the converted accounts from your named accounts? They will only see it once they have experienced it being successful. So I guess my point is, don't try to do it on your own without really, just like uploading a bunch of contacts to Facebook, clicking on the lookalike model, putting one creative, one copy, one asset, one white paper there, clicking, launch campaign, put $1,000 behind it, and hope for the best. Those kind of campaigns are unlikely to work. So I would say that's the best practice is use a vendor for what they do best. If you know of account-based execution, account-based advertising vendor that really knows how to generate MQLs from an named account, close down a budget, time box it in 6 months and say, for the next 2 quarters, our job is to get 100 activated accounts from our list of 1,000 named accounts. If we achieve that, that pilot is successful, and next quarter we're gonna triple the budget. That's for me is best practice. Best practice. Finding a vendor, having a very evidence-based, data-driven, measured success, then trying. The second best practice I would say is trial and error. Be open to failing. So you're gonna try out account-based marketing. That's great. In general, I think account-based marketing as a paradigm, as a process, is sealed. Is proof way to generate demand for a company. I think it's gonna work for you. But how exactly you're gonna execute is gonna determine how fast you're gonna get to that proof point. And so be open to try out ads against those accounts, then change next month, change the offer, change the message, try different personas, try direct mailer one time, try direct mailer plus ads plus email cadence the next time, and be open to reiterating. If you have those two best practices in place, I think your chance of succeeding are very, very high.
I love what you just said there. You said there are a handful of things that are brilliant, actually, and they're so simple, but they make sense. They're common sense. Pick a vendor you can trust, or vendors you can trust. Do tests or do pilot campaigns to see how it works. Spend a small amount of money, refine it, and then build on your success and really expand out and be prepared to fail. That's huge. All right, Gil. So I got to reciprocate here. You have been a wealth of knowledge for us. You are clearly an expert in the space. Talk to us about Metadata IO. Where do you fit in this whole conversation? And should we start with you as a prospective trusted partner as we branch out into ABM?
Thanks for the opportunity. I would love for you to consider us. Companies that we do one thing really well, right? I was just saying that about picking a vendor. So we do one thing very well. If you go to G2 Crowd, account-based execution or metadata, you will see exactly what we do well. And that is, we can get your named accounts or companies that are definitely in your total addressable market, companies that need your product, can afford your product, and the right people within those companies. We can get those particular personas to come to your landing page, convert, become a known lead, and then we will tell you exactly how that lead came into place to begin with. What version of the creative they clicked on, what version of the copy they saw, which channel they came from, what campaign type, what audience they converted from. Is it your target list of companies? Is it your buyer intent one? Are those using your competitive solution, etc.? And we'll deliver them to your marketing automation. So that's the value. You can guarantee and can rely on metadata to get you a velocity of opt-in, inbound marketing qualified leads from your named accounts or other similar accounts to come to you. That's the value. The second, I guess the competitive advantage that we have over our competition, and competition can be either solutions like Demandbase and Terminus, or just agencies who do those things for you in a manual fashion. The competitive advantage to metadata is it's a continuously learning machinery. So we're connected to your marketing automation. We're connected to your Salesforce. And so when we optimize your paid media campaigns, your paid account-based advertising campaigns, we don't optimize them based on impressions and clicks. We optimize them based on, do the leads they generate turn into MQL? Do they keep consuming more pieces of content from you on your website? Do they come to your pricing page? Do they get high marketing automation score? And most interestingly, because we are sitting on your Salesforce, do they convert into opportunity? Do they influence or push and make decisions in your opportunities and get you bookings? Based on that, we'll go back to the experiments and we execute all of them on your behalf. You don't have to sit there every day and launch campaigns. The AI executes campaigns for you. The AI will determine out of the 1,000 experiments it's running for you, those campaigns are performing well and those campaigns are not performing well. It will automatically shut down the 80% of the campaigns that are not performing well, and it will quadruple the budget and do more of the 20% that are generating pipeline and velocity for you. That's, in 3 minutes, what metadata does.
He's done that before. That's Gil Allouche. He's the CEO of Metadata.io. Check him out online. Follow Gil. Wealth of knowledge. LinkedIn, Twitter, all the usual places. If you like today, there's more. We do this every single month. We call it VanillaSoft University, second Tuesday of the month. You can find all that content at VanillaSoft.com. And if you like the big issues, the big topics, the hairy stuff, well, the fourth Tuesday of every month, we call that our influencer series. So join us then too. My name is Daryl Prale. Today it was all about cutting through the crap, getting through the noise, learning about account-based marketing. What's going to be next month? I don't know, but stay tuned. We're coming back soon. In the meantime, wishing you a fantastic day. We shall talk to you soon. Bye-bye.